In this video, I want to talk you through the process that I've used to illustrate the monsters and the player characters in the game Dungeon Mapmaker. Dungeon Mapmaker is a tabletop game that is essentially two games in one. In the mapping part of the game, you are going to be creating a blueprint of a dungeon by rolling dice and drawing rooms on each turn. And as you go, you're going to be trying to fulfill scoring objectives, known as quests, that you can then earn time and gold for, and you can then use that time and gold to explore the dungeon in the second half of the game, the exploration phase, where you're going to be collecting loot and fighting monsters and that kind of thing. So that's the game in a nutshell, and it is currently only available in English, but we should have the French, German and Spanish editions within the next couple of months, and I'd say by the end of the year at the absolute latest. So yeah, if you're interested in the game, I will put a link in the description so you can check it out. But the purpose of this video is just to share the process of how the art for the monsters and the characters was created and the different choices that were involved. So personally, I've always enjoyed listening to artists talk about their processes, and I've learned a lot that way as well. And so even though the illustrations for Dungeon Mapmaker are all quite small and relatively simple, I thought it might be fun just to walk you through the process for creating one of the monsters in the game. To begin though, I want to talk about the overall art direction for Dungeon Mapmaker. And the basic things that you'll find in the game when it comes to the character design that there's a lot of kind of inky black line work with a lot of stippling involved. And the thought behind that was, because this is a print and play game, the illustrations would kind of show up well regardless of how good your printer at home was. Or even if you printed in black and white, the actual artwork would still show up well enough. So that was the thought behind that, and plus it kind of harkens back to kind of this old school kind of feel that I wanted to ape a little bit with the character design. And in that way, I'd say that the colors that are used also don't have kind of gradations or gradients blending the different colors. They're usually just solid colors that are blended via stippling or other methods. So that was the idea there. And another big part of the conceptually of the character design is that there's a mix of classic and new and original content, and this reflects, I think, the actual game design itself, which does borrow a lot of classic RPG elements, such as fighting monsters and collecting loot, and even the idea of a grid, of like a square grid, is quite old school in terms of role playing and that kind of thing. But I think there are also some modern board game elements in the game. For example, the scoring system for earning time and gold, I think, is more of a kind of a modern take on things. And so I wanted that to be reflected in the actual illustrations themselves, so that you'd have a mixture of classic monsters, but you'd also have some original monsters, and also some classic monsters that do have kind of atypical appearances, so that the game had this slightly nostalgic feeling, but also felt a bit new at the same time. So these are my general ideas with the overall art direction. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how I illustrated one of the monster cards, and specifically a monster known as a rotter. Now, if it's not obvious, a rotter is a kind of an original monster that I've created for the game, and specifically it was created for the curse card in the wood set of cards. So these are cards that all have a kind of a woodland type theme, and this monster is generated from a curse card, which is an optional card. So a lot of people might not play with this card at all. So I did want to make it feel a bit unique and different in a way to the other monsters in the game. So part of the attributes that this monster has is that it doesn't move, which is unique, and it also doesn't stumble, which in Dungeon Map Maker is basically a critical fail. It just means that the monster doesn't do anything on their turn. And so these are two ways where the rotters are unique in the game. It also heals other monsters by kind of spreading its essence through the air, and it can also spawn smaller monsters in the game. So it can be a bit of a handful in the exploration phase of Dungeon Map Maker. So with all these things in mind, I was thinking about it being a kind of tree that was infected with the essence in the game that essentially imbues all of the monsters that you find in the game. And I also wanted to make sure if it was a plant or a tree, but not like a tree man necessarily. I thought that that's kind of been done so many times at this point that I kind of wanted to move away from the idea of it having the eyes and a face exactly. So that's kind of what I was thinking about preparing to draw it. But yeah, once I'd kind of worked out what I wanted to do, then I could go into actually drawing it. And so the first step was to collect source material. And in this case, the source material is really simple. I was just looking for images on Google and just finding things that I thought could be inspiration for the monster design. So I searched rotten trees, I think was the search term, and just went through and saved a few images that I liked for different reasons, whether it be, the trunks on some of the trees were kind of creepy looking or looked like they might fit the kind of feel of the game. I did also look at some different kinds of mushrooms that grow on trees. I thought that could be part of the design. I always think mushrooms are kind of a bit something creepy about the way they can kind of grow, and they're unexpected and there's a mystery to them. But in the end, I figured that the artwork would be too small on the cards, so those little details might not register that well, and it wouldn't quite translate that well. So I didn't end up going with that idea. But anyway, I collected a bunch of source material as the first step, and the images that I collected for the source material were then used as part of the second step, the initial sketches. So even for digital illustrations, I almost always do sketches on paper beforehand. I'm not really sure if it's just the ritual of it or it's for the practice, but I think the final artworks always turn out better if I've drawn on paper first when it comes to illustrating things. So this step is really the most important, and even if I'm not doing a digital artwork, I think if I was doing a painting or something like that, then I think it's always good to have do some pencil on paper sketches, as I think it does save a lot of time in the long run if you can envision how things are going to look. And I think also just the tactile nature of drawing on paper rather than using a tablet or something really kind of does add to the finished product in some weird way. And for the illustrations here, I'm not trying to draw anything too refined or detailed, but just a few sketches until I feel comfortable that one of them is usable as a reference point for the eventual digital illustration. In this case, I wanted a kind of creepy rotten tree that also had a kind of mouth or crack in it or something like that, where the monsters that it spews out and the kind of magic healing powers that it spews out on other monsters could come out of. So the first couple of sketches I drew didn't really work, but then the third one I thought I got to the point where it was going to be okay and it was going to work as the basis of the final illustration. And once I get to that point in the illustrations for Dungeon Map Maker, that's it. I just move on and I go and do the final illustrations. So if I was going to do something more detailed, such as like a cover for like a box art or something like that, for a game, I would probably do a lot more sketches and try a lot more different things, and then get to a point where I've got a lot to choose from. But in this case, it's not really necessary. I just need something that's good enough to then base my final illustration on. Then the next step is the final illustration, and this is the most time-consuming part of it. And of course, I opened up good old Procreate and added my photo of the drawing I took in. And the photo, didn't need to be great, because part of the initial step of adding the photo is to then warp the image. And the point of warping is to make sure that it's going to fit the ratio of where it's going to fit on the card, but also to just help the general composition a bit. So just making those little adjustments there. The next step is to do the line art. And this is where I just basically trace the lines of the illustration, then begin adding more details and just kind of fleshing out the illustration there. At one point, I thought that maybe in the kind of general moor region of the tree, maybe it would be good to have some. I felt like there needed to be something else there. Like, it was a bit basic as it was. So I thought maybe I could add some like tentacles or extra arms coming out of the tree, but then I thought that didn't really work either, and it also didn't quite work with the whole concept of this monster itself, and it took away from the mystery of the monster a bit. So I didn't end up going with that, but it still needed something beyond what it was at the time. So I thought maybe it would be good to have kind of this substance oozing out of the mouth of the kind of stump part and I thought that this could work, because it kind of feels like it's natural and unnatural at the same time. Like, it's natural in the sense that trees have sap, but it's also unnatural because there's just too much of it. It's like a bleeding tree in some ways. So I thought that was kind of a bit interesting. So I went with that. And then the last step was just to add more detail in the line work. And once the line art was done, I then turned down the opacity of the line art layer in Procreate, and then add a separate layer for the fill, where I'm going to add the color. And when it comes to color, I am not a color theory expert, and I've tried to keep things very simple when it comes to the color choices for each character design. I usually just use a couple of different colors. In this case, I just went with a kind of dull green for the tree itself, and then having kind of a glowing pinky fuchsia type color coming out of the tree, which is the same color as the essence in the game, which is like the monster, kind of the color of monsters and the color of the monster's eyes and things like that. Then for the kind of sap substance, I went with almost the color of blood, but not quite. So you're not quite sure, is it sap, is it blood, or is it some other weird, is it a mixture of things? Who knows? And I'm not even sure what it is, but I tried a couple of things before I got to that point, and I thought, oh, that looks interesting enough. So at that point, I was basically done. The last step is just to turn the opacity of the line art back, and that's it. And this is how the finished card came out. With other projects, I would generally go through more iterations in the whole process of creating a character or a landscape or something like that for the art assets of a game. But here, I kept things relatively simple, because I just really didn't have the luxury of being able to spend a lot of time on each character. But even still, each illustration probably took me on average about 2 hours, and there were 38 illustrations all up when it comes to all the monsters and the characters. So it really did make sense to go with that kind of quicker approach than usual. But yeah, that's it. If you do have a question or a comment, I'd love to hear what you think. So feel free to drop a question or comment in the comments. But otherwise, yeah, thanks for checking this out.